I recently ridiculed my fellow YouTuber and close personal friend Hamza because of his somewhat paranoid views on plastic contaminating you through your diet, through your bed sheets, through the wallet in your pocket, through the plastic receipts you've placed inside your wallet, folded over and placed in your pocket. You think that's still too close to your skin. It's somehow seeping into your body, seeping into your blood, seeping into your bones. That plastic, his theory is that plastic is effeminizing you. Now, you may not know this about me. I lived on a rainy little island called Taiwan during one of the largest scale biological experiments conducted in human history. A custom developed in Taiwan of drinking diaphanous soda pop, diaphanous fruit juices. And from the first time I went to Taiwan, I remember this. Look at these fruit juices in a bowl, something like apple juice, say, being sold in a plastic bottle, the same way you buy Coca-Cola, that kind of format. And it would just be kind of glittering and gleaming. It would have an opaque glow to it that fruit juice does not have anywhere else in the world. I'd never seen it before or since. Would you like to know what the secret ingredient is? Would you like me to cut to the chase here? It's plastic. More than 20 million people in Taiwan were drinking plastic on a daily basis. I don't mean they were drinking from a plastic container. I mean plastic was itself an ingredient in the drink. It was suspended in the liquid. And they were ingesting this, digesting it, and excreting it on a daily basis. That's an island of more than 20 million people living in modern conditions with access to much better medical care than I have access to, frankly. It's not the best healthcare system in the world, but they have, just this is not some remote island in the South Pacific that's lacking modern hospitals and modern medical diagnostic equipment. I was in Taiwan and I was reading the newspaper. I'd like to say every day. It's not true. Let's say I was reading the newspaper every week. I was following news and politics in Taiwan when the scandal broke I think they would call it microplastics, but we're really talking about liquid plastic, ingested plastic, because sensibly enough, this was in fact illegal in Taiwan along. Like the rest of the world, it's illegal to feed people plastic as a beverage. There was a law, there was a regulation against it somewhere, but you know how these things just become normal. Someone starts selling a kind of glittering, diaphanous, opaque fruit juice or soda pop or whatever it is, and then another company competes with them, and nobody in the government takes interest in it, and it's all business as usual. There are safety inspections being carried out of these factories, but that's not what they're looking for. They're probably looking for bacteria or other kinds of contamination. Nobody's thinking about it, and before you know it, whatever, like 10, 20 years have gone by, and millions of people have been drinking plastic on a daily basis. Now, the point of this video ultimately is for you to make a judgment about your own character and to prepare to make the same judgments about other people in your life. Your own father, your own mother, your best friend, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife, your coworkers, your colleagues in a political movement, your rivals in a political movement. One of the most fundamental differences between people is whether you can best get across an idea like this by describing it on an enormous scale, talking about a society of millions, or by talking about it on the smallest scale. Some people respond very well to abstract reasoning. Some people respond very well to tangible reasoning that has a human face on it, a human cost, something you can relate to, something you can visualize. And this is the difference between people. Melissa and I both tend to think about veganism on a scale of millions of people, on an ecological scale, on a global scale. We were in Taiwan, and we'd say to people, there are 20 million human beings living on this island. If all of those people eat pork every day, how many pigs are on this island right now? All the people eat, and they all flush the toilet pigs don't flush the toilet. So we got 20 million people and we got 60 million pigs. That's a whole lot of pig manure going downstream, right? That's a whole lot of pig manure, one way or another, getting into the rivers, getting in the ocean. That's the kind of reasoning, Melissa and I have this kind of reasoning we're susceptible to. Not everyone is. Maybe you're not. Maybe what you respond to is seeing the expression in a pig's eye as it's being slaughtered, the suffering, the torment, the blood. Maybe what you relate to is when I talk to you about the next 5 years of your life and who you want to be, your own personal narrative on a timeline, the idea of becoming a better person, and so on and so forth. What it is you respond to, your way of reasoning, right? And then reciprocal with that, your way of making excuses. Because reasoning isn't always used to a good purpose. You can reason your way into something. You can reason your way out of it too. But look, it's shallow and it's deep at the same damn time. Like what we're talking about right now, it's shallow. Fortunately, it's crucially important, even for the very continued existence of planet Earth. I'm sorry to say. All right. So let's just say Hamza were a friend of mine. Let's just say Hamza were my own younger brother. So we established last time how old he is. 25, 26, something, we don't know. We established it and I forgot. But let's say Hamza is my younger brother. I don't know Hamza that well. But I might say to him, if your theory were true, if your philosophy were true about plastic, we should see drastically different health outcomes. When we're looking at the population of Papua New Guinea, we're looking at people who have very little plastic in their diet, very little access to plastic. And when we're looking at the population of Taiwan, we should see measurable, palpable outcomes epidemiologically, right? These people exposed to a massive amount of plastic, not just packaging, not just the fabric of their clothes, not just their bed sheets. It's in the very fruit juice they drank for so many years. We should see a stark difference between the health problems they have and the population of some island in the South Pacific where, whether due to poverty or lack of trade connections, they don't get any of that the bottled pop, the bottled fruit juices from Taiwan, and they live a life where there's dramatically less plastic in their diet and on their person. Okay, right? Epidemiologically, when you scale it up, when you're thinking about a society of millions. Now, I've lived through quite a few of these health scares. I was quite a small boy when there was a really sincere health scare about aluminum. The word aluminum has two official pronunciations. Some of you will be punching your desks in anger that I'm not saying aluminium. The British Empire is over, guys. Deal with it. Anyway, there was a concern that began with a biopsy of the brains of a small number of men. And I think it was like 4 men, but it might have been 7. It was a small number. It was fewer than 10. And this type of research is expensive. And all 4 of these men, or whatever it was, they had trace amounts, but significant amounts of aluminum in their brains at the time of death. And it was found they had aluminum throughout their whole bodies. How does aluminum get into your body? I will tell you in just a moment, dear viewer. And this sparked, if you aren't old enough to remember this, take it from me because I am. It used to be very, very common for people to have aluminum frying pans. They disappeared. This brought in the golden age of Teflon. And then there was a craze where people thought Teflon was terrible for your health and they stopped using Teflon. They used to use solid aluminum pans. And if you don't know what an aluminum pan looks like, those coffee machines, those little espresso machines where you screw the two halves together, Belletti coffee machines, that's aluminum, right? Not steel, not cast iron. But anyway, there was this craze to get rid of aluminum cookware, get rid of aluminum forks, knives, spoons. When you open a can of soup, what's the soup preserved? When you open a can of Coca-Cola, what is the can of Coca-Cola preserved in? In fact, people continue to have massive levels of exposure to aluminum in their diet. But epidemiologically, there were still some societies on this earth, I would imagine Samoa. I don't know. You have to go way out there, not even outer islands of Samoa. There were some populations that didn't have significant exposure to aluminum. So one of the first things to look at was, okay, these health problems that we are speculatively attributing to aluminum, can we actually pin down a contrasting population and look at how things would be with zero aluminum in your diet? And then, of course, it's somewhat easier to find, say, within the United States of America, look at populations of people who are very heavy users of aluminum and who are eating particular foods that dissolve a lot of aluminum and carry it into your body, as opposed to those who have less, not none, but less, and quantify it and so on and so on. Absolutely no significant health effects were ever found for having aluminum in your diet. You may not know this. Every single time you eat from a steel fork or a steel spoon, or you make pasta in a steel pan, you are actually dissolving and eating some of the metal. And this can be measured, the amount of metal that's entering your diet this way. And some people prefer to use cast iron instead of steel for this reason. Some people prefer to use steel rather than aluminum. All of the research indicates that we can just plain tolerate it. Now, look, maybe if human beings live to be 300 years old, it would be a problem. Just sheer speculation. Maybe the accumulation of these metals would eventually become a problem in your body, and it's not because 100 years just isn't long enough. You know, if someone puts out the hypothesis, well, we're not evolved to cope with metal. Well, yeah, but we do. It turns out we cope with metal. And by the way, also the vast majority of insecticides, pesticides that are in use, we're not evolved to cope with them. We just do. You know, that's why we every single day gardens are sprayed with pesticides, crops are sprayed with pesticides, and we eat these pesticides, and their effect on us is trivial. I'm actually not making the dogmatic claim that the effect is zero. Some of these pesticides have some effect on your body. And again, if you would like to, at an epidemiological level, you can contrast a population that has zero exposure to pesticides to the opposite, so on and so forth. You can also do that looking at the plants themselves. I read a study that was looking at wheat, and it was investigating the theory that wheat grown with chemical fertilizer is somehow less healthy than wheat raised without any chemical fertilizer. I think that one didn't get into pesticides. And you can imagine ultimately, like you can look at human health, epidemiological response. You can also take the wheat, put it into a mass spectrometer, look at it molecule by molecule, atom by atom, say, is there any difference? Is there any difference in the health properties of this wheat versus this wheat? So on and so forth, whether it's with pesticides or with any of these other chemical items. Okay, so in case you haven't picked up on it, this is cyclical. It's going to happen again and again and again, right? And you will notice when people get to be my age, there's a little bit of the boy who cried wolf going on. Like, oh yeah, now you're telling me that it's not safe to use a cast iron pan because every time you cook food in iron, the iron dissolves. Oh yeah, well, I remember when you people were saying this about aluminum, and I remember when you were saying it about Teflon, and I remember when you were saying about stainless steel. It seems like every couple of years there's another fad theory, and there's really no evidence to back it up. And by the way, I am very critical of some of the vegan doctors, some of the self-appointed health experts who are willing to leap on studies that suggest there's some effect in your health of something. And, again, the effect may be trivial. So you just mentioned one really briefly. Dr. Greger jumped on the bandwagon as soon as there was a study showing that exposure to the fumes that are released when cooking food in oil, that this causes some terrible health problem. So the point was just standing in your own kitchen, say sauteing vegetables in olive oil, that this releases gases that are allegedly terrible for your health. Well, in the United States of America, a very significant population works at McDonald's, at Arby's, at Harvey's. Give me some more. What are some fast food? Yeah, but Taco Bell, do they deep fry at Taco Bell? I guess they do the churros, right? Okay. A lot of people work in the back of a fast food restaurant or even a slow food restaurant. A lot of people work in the restaurant industry where they stand over a vat of bubbling oil for like 6 hours a day or more. They are standing there while the fries are bubbling. They're exposed to whatever these fumes are that come from oil in a think about the amount of oil in a shallow pan versus a deep fryer. Okay, you think the gases released from bubbling oil are a problem. So epidemiologically, tell me, in a population of more than 300 million people, why doesn't it show up that there are particular health problems that people who work in the back of McDonald's have, people who work in the back of Arby's, people who work in the back of people who work with you? Don't you think? Don't you think it would show? I'll just mention one really briefly. Again, this is from my own childhood. It's very memorable. In the old days, they used to make wristwatches with a mildly radioactive element called tritium. Now, the radioactivity, you can imagine there were some hippies who said, oh, they wouldn't want to wear this wristwatch because they believed the radiation would penetrate through their skin. And you can imagine sort of the usual chorus of voices, both from industry and chin stroking respectable academic scientists saying, no, 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 the amount of radiation, even if there wasn't a metal backing to the watch, it wouldn't be powerful enough to penetrate your skin and into the bloodstream. There's all these reassurances given to the public. And then you know what? The people who worked in the factories that made the watches, they all started having really weird health problems. And it turned out it's no harm to you once it's inside the watch, but there was something going on at the factory where the factory workers were having health problems caused by exposure to radiation and radioactivity. Now, I do not know if this is true. I suspect this is a story that was made up. One of the proposals for why the people in the factory were getting sick, I can think of many. I mean, my suggestion is, just as it's different to work in McDonald's standing over a vat of bubbling oil than it is to be in your own kitchen I would guess it's just the intensity of the exposure. Like, yeah, well, you have one wristwatch. This person is sitting in a factory at a line assembling 1,000 wristwatches a day. So their exposure is more, and they're taking it as a liquid paint and they're applying it to the watch or whatever. It's different. Probably some of it is in the air. Some of it gets on their skin. They're exposed to it in a way you aren't. You get it as a finished product. They're working with these things, and producing 100 or 1,000 a day, whatever it is. It's different. That would be my skeptical assumption, is simply that the production process is different than the owning the finished product. But one of the proposals was that the problem was these women would sit with a paintbrush and would paint on the dots on the watch or paint on the lines, or whatever it was. And that these women were touching the paintbrush to their tongue to get the paintbrush to a nice point. I would just know, though, this subtle, in a subtle way, this shifts the blame onto the workers, right? And it's not the problem of management. It's you guys aren't following the instructions. It's really your fault for putting the paintbrush in your mouth. Maybe. So again, this is not my area of expertise, and I am not planning to do even a moment of further research on this. Okay, this is one form of reasoning. Most of these important decisions we make in life do rely on bro science. A certain type of person, when they're committed to a bro science view of the world, can be drawn out of that by being confronted with this more kind of global, cerebral, abstract way of reasoning. And a lot of people can't. So you guys may have noticed we're living through right now the golden age of the belief in collagen as magic. So I'm actually going to read the last email I have on this before the first. I got an email from this guy. He's defending his decision to not be vegan, his decision to reject a vegan diet, because he believes that he needs to eat collagen in order to relieve or reduce or avoid joint pain. So I assume this is something like ankle pain. I assume it's something like arthritis. I don't know. I don't ask for details, but I assume there are symptoms, broadly speaking, along those lines. So this is quoting from the last email he sent me, not the first. I'm going to read you the first later. He says, "You do realize that collagen type 2 is made and used by the body to sustain cartilage health. Now, just pause. He's already admitting there that collagen is made by our own bodies, right? That you don't rely on an external source of it. It's already significant. I continue. You realize that with increased age, your body makes less but needs more. This is one reason why the elderly suffer from arthritis. So collagen type 2 supplements make perfect sense in an aging person to compensate for reduced collagen type 2 production decline. Okay, he has a pleonasm there. I think you get the point, although there was something amiss with the structure of that sentence. All right. So I'll read the earlier messages in the sequence. We have a great question from the audience that's right on topic. Should I learn German? Asks the 123. All right, I'll read my first response to this guy. You guys should already know some of the questions to ask at this point in the video. Do you think we can look at two different populations of elderly people? For example, people who are strictly vegetarian caste Hindus in India, people who are members of the Jain religion, people who are strictly vegetarian or vegan as part of the Chinese tradition. Do you think we're going to look at those populations as they're elderly and have radically different health outcomes than the standard American diet in terms of joint health, right? So that's reasoning at a large level, society of millions, because the real world is our laboratory, right? If plastic is bad for you, and by the way, let me just say, I don't think eating plastic is good for you. I'm not making that claim. And by the way, you'll see in this too, I'm also very careful. I'm not making a reckless health claim in favor of veganism or against the opposite side here. My perspective isn't just skeptical, it's nihilistic. In many ways, my perspective is that both sides of this argument are bullshit. I am not making the claim that it's perfectly healthy to eat plastic. I think the government of Taiwan made it illegal to have plastic as an additive in beverages for good reason. Nevertheless, we're confronted with the evidence we're confronted with. Maybe something is bad for you, but we just plain get away with it. Now, so look, if we are looking at societies of millions of people, and if it were really true that the scarcity of collagen was a crucial problem for your body producing and sustaining enough collagen for its own choice, so the lack of collagen in your diet, right? Why is it just you? Why isn't there epidemiological evidence on a massive scale? And, again, you can use your reasoning to make excuses rather than engage with the problem. But at a minimum, you should recognize how high the standards are here, what an onus there is on you, what a burden of proof there is on you to demonstrate that there really is a significant scientific relationship, cause and effect relationship between these things. All right. So here's my first reply to the guy in this sequence of messages. Quote, I think it has to be acknowledged that we're getting out of the arena of science and into the arena of merely empirical experience, which is something I do not sneer at, but something that deserves a name and a category of its own that the English language does not quite have a term for. To give an example, if I met a man who said that he struggled to sustain an erection during sex, but then found that drinking hot sauce massively improved his sex life, I would not tell him that he was hallucinating, nor would I dismiss this as pseudoscience. But also, I would not regard this as evidence that hot chili peppers have a scientifically real effect on blood circulation, nor would I regard it as an indication that the subjective experience of eating spicy food is erotic or arousing as some kind of universal fact. Just pause. Keep in mind, true skepticism, right? It's not about condemning one side or the other. It's not about me saying, I know and you don't. It's about me saying, I don't know and you don't know either. And here is how to live with that doubt, right? And there are a lot of these things on a human individual level. every so often, I mean, we eat in a restaurant and then we have terrible indigestion afterwards for 6 hours or 12 hours. And we sit around and speculate, what is it you think caused that indigestion? And there's a sense in which you don't really know. And you make a decision. Do you decide I'm never going to eat at that restaurant again? Do you decide I'm never going to have Mexican style refried beans again? Do you decide I'm never going to have spicy food again? Like, you can attribute it to different things. You had indigestion, you don't know why. So we all deal with bro science. We all deal with drawing conclusions from incomplete anecdotal experience. But you have to be disciplined not to try to make these into universal claims. You can't generalize about them. You know? Can't even generalize within your own life, let alone about populations of millions of people or as broad scientific principles. All right, I continue. Quote, if I met someone whose empirical experience was that drinking hot sauce really directly improved his sex life, I would treat that as an empirical reality, but I wouldn't generalize about it. I wouldn't try to construe it as something equivalent to a law of physics. I have never ever mentioned this on my YouTube channel, for example, but when I switched from being vegetarian to being vegan, both my breathing improved and my eyesight improved. And this is most likely because my sinuses were slightly irritated by the low levels of dairy that had been in my diet before. Just mentioned before I became vegan, Parmesan cheese was in my diet. I didn't have a lot of dairy in my diet, but I had enough, you know. I did. Okay, I'm not going to get into describing my pre-vegan diet, but I wouldn't buy milk. I didn't drink cow milk, for example. So it really was things like cheese being invisibly in pasta and bread most of the time. Sometimes dairy being in things like coffee, mixed coffee drink, things like that. But no, sorry. Before I was vegan, I was vegetarian, and there was dairy in my diet. So morally, I admit I'm on the wrong side here. We're just saying it wasn't a large quantity of dairy. I continue. Quote, I have no explanation for the change. Repeat, I have no explanation for the change, but my ability to breathe more clearly through my nose when I switched to being vegan. Okay, I'm misreading my own sentence here. I have no explanation for the change, but my ability to breathe clearly through my nose really improved when I switched to being vegan. But it is possible that the improvement actually did not have a cause and effect relationship with my diet at all. And of course, the improvement in my eyesight is even more bizarre and inexplicable. I have to wonder if it is more perception than reality, if you know what I mean. Did something about my psychology change rather than my physiology at this time? So look, guys, we all have to deal with this. We all have to deal with inexplicable, anecdotal, bro science, conclusions and surmises in our own private lives. I'm going to share the link to a photo here that's on my Instagram of what I looked like when I was doing 300 push-ups a day just a few months ago. So if you guys don't know the story, it's not all that interesting a story, but very rapidly, I went from doing 100 push-ups a day to 200 push-ups a day, and then from 200 push-ups a day to 300 push-ups a day. So I forget what it was. It was something like I did 100 push-ups, and then 2 days later I did 200 push-ups, and then 2 days after that I did 300. It was something like that, where really fast I pushed myself to get up doing 300 push-ups a day. And if you look at that photograph of me, I look all pumped up and puffy. Why did I stop? Why did I stop working out? From my perspective, my health collapsed because I was getting 2 hours of sleep a night. I was not sleeping properly. I also had coronavirus, and I had all kinds of symptoms from coronavirus. It was long COVID. I wasn't, I wasn't a threat to other people. I'd had coronavirus like 6 months or something. It was ridiculous. Went on and on and on. I had breathing problems caused by coronavirus. Why couldn't I sleep at night? Was it that the breathing problems, the respiratory problems caused by coronavirus were keeping me up? Was it suddenly gaining so much muscle mass kept me up, like suddenly getting in shape, which is in theory a good thing, was messing up my sleep cycle? Was it completely unrelated to this? Was it instead psychological and emotional? I had a lot of sources of psychological and emotional strain in my life at that time. If you just watch my YouTube channel, you can see them. You know, if I were sitting down with a psychiatrist, I could list off a whole bunch of reasons why I wasn't able to sleep at night. I will be honest with you. I'm 100% certain it was a physically real health problem. I don't think it was emotional or intellectual at all. I don't. Um, what if I'm wrong? You know, I feel completely certain that, you know, the combination of coronavirus and exercise, for whatever reason, I was in this pumped up state where I really couldn't sleep at night. I think it was physically real. Okay, well, what if someone else, what if one of these advocates of a carnivore diet comes up with a theory that the reason I was only sleeping for 2 hours a night was because I don't have, what is this shit? Don't have enough gelatin in my diet. One of these ridiculous theories, you know, that it's because I'm eating a vegan diet, right? Or what the other thing that I like to do is talk about these trace amounts of poison that are in vegetables. Like, oh, but the vegetables contain these, yeah, right. It's it's the trace amounts of poison in the broccoli that are keeping me awake at night. But you know, anyone could say anything. Anyone can make up anything this way. Okay, but on the other hand, no matter how shrewd you are, no matter how scientific, you and I both have to live our lives with a certain degree of bro science. I was amazed that at age 44, I could so rapidly go from 100 push-ups a day to 200 push-ups a day to 300 push-ups a day, and all this muscle suddenly, expanded on my body. I didn't think I could do that at age 44. I did it on a vegan diet too, by the way. On the other hand, I was really concerned. I mean, if you're only sleeping 2 hours a night, it would be like 2 hours a night, 2 hours a night, and then there'd be one night where I'd sleep for 4 or 5 hours. You think, oh, great, I'm getting better. And then the next night I'd sleep for 2 hours again or something. It was really, really scary. What's going to happen to me? I know I can't live on 2 hours sleep a night. So I completely stopped exercising in the gym entirely. And I just regarded myself as like, look, I'm just going to presume I need bed rest or something until I'm finally over coronavirus. And I forget how many, but it's something like for 6 months. I'd had coronavirus already at that point. So I was sick and tired of having, long COVID or these coronavirus. Okay. That's the judgment I made. I just had to make a decision. I don't have a whole lot, but another person could look at that and say, no, what you need to do is 400 push-ups a day. No, the reason why you can't get sleep at night is that you're not doing enough exercise in the gym. Someone else could have made that decision. Someone else, could have taken some drug, could have responded to the challenge a different way. But I am saying true skepticism is not about having the attitude of, I know the truth and you don't. I'm a dogmatist, you're a dogmatist, but my dogma is right and yours is wrong. True skepticism is about, I don't know, you don't know, we don't know together. And you're going to hear that even within this email. But a lot of people don't get it. A lot of people, frankly, are not smart enough to pick up on what I'm laying down here. Okay. Whew. So I continue. In this way, I think there's a category of empirical experience of things that one knows, but never really knows with a certainty of a law of physics. If you were on a 100% vegan diet for 6 months, would your aforementioned health conditions get better or worse? So the question here is swelling of the joints, pain in the joints, something resembling the symptoms of arthritis. Okay, so if you got an 100% vegan diet for 6 months, so then you have no collagen in your diet, no gelatin, and so on, would this health condition get better or worse? And I'm quoting myself here. The next thing I say is, I think the truth is, you don't know. My position is not one of dogmatically telling this guy, if you got in a vegan diet for 6 months, your health would improve or your health wouldn't get worse. I don't even claim that. My claim is, you don't know. You are making a judgment based on your empirical experience, which he is. He feels that anecdotally, when he started having more chicken broth, I forget what the sources of collagen. It's mostly chicken broth, and he mentioned a couple other things, and collagen supplements. That when he started taking more collagen, 2 months after he started doing that, he felt the pain in his joints got better. Okay, so that's bro science, right? That's just your empirical experience. What if you try going on a vegan diet for 6 months and the pain in your joints gets even better still? Now, just digress to mention, there are all kinds of indirect and irrelevant reasons why that can happen too. You get on a vegan diet and you lose weight. So now you weigh less and the pain in your joints gets better for that reason. My point is, it may not be a direct mechanism. You get in a vegan diet famously is anti-inflammatory. You have less inflammation throughout your whole system. Pain and joints get better. You get in a vegan diet and your digestion improves. You just have less in it. You have a high fiber diet and all the benefits of that. And for that reason, you feel better. Like, you know what I mean? Like there could be reasons totally unrelated to any sort of mechanism to do with cartilage or your joints, why you could be on a vegan diet for 6 months and say, wow, this feels great. That's the other problem with bro science. You know, with these kinds of bro science things, I mean, look, guys, not one person has looked at that photograph and said, hey, Eisel, what were you eating at the time? How could I get on your 300 push-ups a day diet where in 3 weeks you bulked up this way? Nobody fucking wants to know. You probably don't want to eat the food I eat. You know, I'm just saying, you know, but again, I'm not stupid enough to say that. What are the factors that will let you have any of these physical outcomes, right? On this human level, it remains mysterious to us. We deal with things we don't know, and we have to have this kind of informed, engaged, but detached perspective, right? All right. So I just repeat that sentence. If you were on a 100% vegan diet for 6 months, would your health conditions get better or worse? I think the truth is you don't know. Many people report drastic improvements in joint pain when they switch to a vegan diet, and the primary reason for this is reduced inflammation. But there are probably complex secondary reasons as well. A vegan diet improves just about everything, including the circulation of blood throughout the body. So there can be a lot of little improvements in things like joint pain without a single simple cause and effect explanation. Of course, conversely, it could just be that some people who adopt the vegan diet are losing body fat and gaining muscle, and they attribute the improvements in their joints to their diet, whereas it is in fact the result of weight loss and overall improvement in health and strength. The list of conditions that are alleviated in mysterious ways with body fat is very long indeed. I missed one crucial word in that last sentence. The list of conditions that are alleviated in mysterious ways with the loss of body fat is very long indeed. So will your joint pain get better or worse if you tried being on a vegan diet for 6 months? The honest answer is you don't know, and I don't know. Am I making anyone any false promises on this YouTube channel? Is this guy going to be able to write back to me 6 months from now and say he tried being on a vegan diet and I'm a fraud and I'm a sham and I promised him something to? No. You know, I'm sorry, but this is the real truth. I'm not asking you to believe in anything, right? That this is the real truth. The truth is you don't know. It's on you. Are you going to be a pussy? Are you going to be a coward? Or are you going to fucking try? You know, like that's all it comes down to. Someone could have told him before he tried eating all this chicken soup, someone could have told him, don't do it. Having all that bone broth and all that cartilage or whatever is terrible for your health. They could have listed off all these bad things. Don't do it. Be afraid. He was bold enough. He was courageous enough to try this bone broth diet. You carried out an experiment with your own health. You put your life on the line because you thought maybe bone broth would help you. Are you bold enough to carry out an experiment where you eat no bone broth at all? Right? If you really believe the bone broth works, you know what I mean? Why not be bold enough and brave enough to carry out that experiment? Now, as experiments go, it's a pretty low risk experiment. You know, we're not really saying you're putting your life on the line to either eat chicken soup or refuse to eat chicken soup. Pretty low stakes as these things go. But nevertheless, it is a kind of gambit, right? That if you want to learn from empirical experience, you can't be a fucking pussy. You can't be a coward. If you guys want to know what's going on in Cambodian politics, you can sit back in your armchair and read books and watch things on Google, or you can fucking go to Cambodia, and it's dangerous. You guys want to know what's going on right now in the civil war in Myanmar? How do you want to find out? You want to find out through empirical experience? You want to find out through trial and failure? Right? You got to put your neck on the line. You got to put your ass on the line. You got to go out and take some risks. You can't be a pussy. You can't be a coward. So I know it's ridiculous to say this, but these are the underlying traits that really matter, right? I say, ultimately, the point of this video is for you to draw a judgment about yourself, about the kind of reasoning you're susceptible to, whether that's, using reason to understand the world and to change the world, or using reason to make excuses, right? And we also have to think about how courageous we are. I remember there's a study that's been quoted a great deal in newspapers. There's a study of how to teach people how to play basketball. And they divided them into 3 groups. and one group they only did hands-on empirical experience with, no theory. One group they only taught theoretically how to shoot a basket. So they used a chalkboard and diagrams and scientific reasoning and explained the physics of how to get the ball in the basket, right? And then one group, they did both. They both taught them the theory and the practice, right? So one group is hands-on only, one group's theory only, one group's both. What a surprise. The group that improved the most, their ability to play basketball, was the group that had both. But as I recall, the point was that the people who learned the theory actually were better than the people who only had hands-on practical experience. That you were better off learning from a chalkboard and a diagram how to score a basket in basketball than just running around and practicing, just kind of training without the theory at all. That was maybe a biased study. But yeah, there are a lot of people on vacation in Cambodia right now who won't learn a goddamn thing. There are actually surprising numbers of people who still go on vacation to Myanmar too. So yeah, it's got to be both. But if you want to live from, pardon me, if you want to learn from empirical experience, shout out to the LOX. Does anyone know the rap group, the LOX? LOX. Do you know why they're called LOX? LOX stands for learning. No. Living on experience. That's why I'm screwing up. I keep saying living from experience instead of learning from experience. So that's the LOX rap group that's influenced me more than you can know. Okay. If you want to learn from experience, or if like the LOX, you want to be living on experience, it's your ass on the line. It's your risk. It's your effort. It's your gambit. It's your research, and your body and your mind is the instrument, right? It's not that man is the measure of all things. It's that you are, and you got to get out there and start using your measuring stick. Okay. All right. Will your joint pain get better or worse if you try being on a vegan diet for 6 months? The honest answer is you don't know, and I don't know. It is possible that your health would get worse in the specific ways you're worried about, but it is merely possible. Now, the following principle you will agree with. Whatever makes broccoli healthy or unhealthy, good or bad, exists in the form of molecules within that broccoli. We can put broccoli through a mass spectrometer analysis and figure out atom by atom what it is composed of, which vitamins, which minerals, etc. If you ask me what it is that is healthy about broccoli, I can point to the molecules it is composed of. No more, no less. It is as healthy as the chemical components it is comprised of. Have you ever examined skeptically what it is that chicken broth is composed of in this way? What is the molecule, or what is the chemical precisely that you think is uniquely or distinctively healthy about this particular foodstuff, about chicken broth? He didn't answer this, by the way, in his following correspondence. Some people, you can talk to them and say, okay, you believe bone broth is good for your health. It's a fad right now. You believe that. And we can focus in on the bone broth. We can say, okay, so we take the bone broth and we put it under a microscope. We take the bone broth and we put it through a mass spectrometer. We take the bone broth and we think about it atom by atom, molecule by molecule. What does it contain that you think is special, that you think is lacking in my diet, right? So, you say it has protein. Okay, well, my diet also has, it has salt. My diet also has salt. What does this actually contain? What is the claim based on, right? Some people can think about it that way. Some people can't. Some people instead will respond to, well, what if we scale this up and we think about a society of millions? And there are millions of people who eat bone broth every day, and there are millions of people who are strict vegetarians or vegans. They eat no bone broth at all. What are the differences we're going to see in their health outcomes, right? Like, even if bone broth has some health benefit, if it's so trivial that it doesn't show up epidemiologically in a population of millions of people, what are we really talking about? And by the way, just let me ask you, the health outcomes of comparing cigarette smokers to non-cigarette smokers, do you think those are trivial? The people who chew tobacco as opposed to people who do not chew tobacco, you think they're trivial? They're not trivial. Even the population of people who chew tobacco, who don't smoke it, right? There's a profile of cancers they get that are incredibly rare in the rest of the population, are incredibly common for people who just use chewing tobacco. All right. My grandmother was a dentist, and she said the most horrifying part of her job was operating on guys who used chewing tobacco. Because anyway, a lot of them had undergone surgeries to remove parts of the inside of their mouths. It was horrifying. And they had cancer and other terrible problems as a result of their addiction to chewing tobacco. Okay. The health effects of chewing tobacco are not trivial. They show up epidemiologically. Okay, so let's do the other half of it. So if you take tobacco and put it under a microscope, if you take tobacco and put it through a mass spectrometer, Scooby-Dooby-Doo! What's going to solve the mystery, Scoob? How are we going to figure out what it is that's unhealthy about tobacco, Scoob? I just don't know. I mean, it's a green leaf. I mean, like, lettuce is a leaf. People say lettuce is healthy. What do you think, Scoob? I don't know. Well, guess what? Lettuce does not contain nicotine. Lettuce does not contain tar, okay? Tobacco literally contains tar, literally contains nicotine. Read the side of the carton of cigarettes. It'll tell you with different brands how much tar, how much nicotine. I remember I was shocked when I heard a description of what it was like working on a tobacco farm. And the guy said that you got high from the fluid within the tobacco. You're pulling it out like you're pulling out a weed, to harvest the stuff. And he said the spray of both the nicotine and the tar on your skin would have these really crazy effects on you working in a nicotine farm all day. So yeah, this is pulling out hundreds and hundreds of, I don't know, nicotine seedlings, whatever the hell they're doing for harvest, whatever it's doing. Yeah, but anyway, he's basically weeding a tobacco patch, Anyway, well, yeah, and I was just really surprised that he was saying at the end of the day when you went to shower that the tar and so on was visible on your skin. I again, empirically, I haven't seen this myself. I've got to tell you, it made me interested to go get a job on a tobacco farm. Sounds like a hell of an experience, frankly. Okay. But yeah, why is cigarette smoking bad for you? One way to think of it is to scale up and look at a society of millions. Another way is to focus in, look at it under a microscope. One way is to think about it in the abstract and the hypothetical. Another way is to think about it very palpably with a human face on it, a particular person's story. One of the main ways I talk about smoking cigarettes is, who do you want to be 5 years from now? Think about your life, the life of one person on a timeline. Is that who you want to be 5 years from now? You want to be addicted to nicotine? You want to be someone who has to interrupt the conversation to go outside and smoke a cigarette? Is that like even little things like that? Do you want to be the guy who can't walk up a flight of stairs? There are these things. That's just looking at one person's life in the next 5 years. When Melissa and I did train journeys with my daughter, I'm divorced. My first wife has a daughter. I very rarely get to visit in France. I now haven't seen her for many years. But many years ago, when we were visiting my daughter, it was hilarious to see all these people who would be lined up at the train every time the train stopped to run outside and smoke a cigarette. The train would only stop for 3 minutes. Stop very briefly at each city, smoke a cigarette, and then jump back on the train. This was also illegal in France. You're not allowed to smoke in the train stations, but they tolerate it because otherwise these people will smoke on the train, and they're that addicted. You can't go 2 hours without a cigarette. Is that who you want to be 5 years from now? So again, in a sense, any one of these in isolation is meaningless. But there are different ways in. There are different ways to influence people. One of these is getting at you, right? Either you can think on the huge scale of millions. You can think on the hypothetical timeline of your own life in 5 years. Either you can think about what this is under a microscope. And when you're talking to your own father, your own husband, your own wife, your own son, your own daughter, you may have to try all of these in convincing them that they should quit smoking, or convincing them they should quit drinking alcohol, or convincing them that this fad diet of bone broth is bullshit, or all of the above. And you may decide they're too stupid and it's not worth your fucking time to even try. It's also an option, right? Sadly, for the vast majority of people, these things just come down to coercion. There's no way you can reason with them. It's impossible to reason with someone who doesn't want to be reasonable. And let me just give you, I've used this image before. Talking about the 5-year timeline, you can also scale that up and talk about groups of people. This is one of my favorite examples. Okay, so if you believe cigarettes aren't bad for you. What if we have 5,000 soldiers who are all going through training in the army? We divide them into two groups, and this group of soldiers, we completely refuse to allow them to smoke cigarettes. If they're smokers, they're forced to quit. Very strict, zero cigarette policy. And the other group of soldiers, we give them all the cigarettes they want. They all smoke cigarettes all day. They're out there training and learning how to fire their rifles and running laps, and they're all cigarette smokers. Guys, if you even see real footage from World War II, all those guys are smoking cigarettes. It's crazy. It's crazy how the military used to just accommodate cigarette smoking around the clock. I've heard stories from the current war in Ukraine. Those guys are all smoking cigarettes, and you're putting your life in danger because snipers can see you when you've got a cigarette lit up at night. The sight of that flame goes a long way. So anyway, you're risking your life and everyone else's life immediately into getting shot. Okay, so 2,500 don't smoke cigarettes, 2,500 do. After 5 years, who do you think is a better group of soldiers? What do you think the outcomes are? I'm just saying, so that kind of thing of thinking over time, that can also be scaled up. And you guys know, I mean, I've lived with all these people, all these left-wing people around me who make excuses for marijuana. They make excuses for ayahuasca, for cocaine, for antidepressant medication, for all these different things. Okay, well, how do you feel about it when we're talking about soldiers in training? How do you feel about it when it's the cops themselves who are getting high? Do these excuses still make sense in these other contexts? So if you guys have been watching my channel for years, you've seen me apply these modes of thinking. And when I talk to people face to face, I'll be honest with you, they find them devastating. Over the internet, you don't really get to see the immediate reaction. But most of my experience in life, being a nihilist and being a public intellectual, is that when I challenge people's beliefs, people break down crying in front of me. People becoming very upset. People look back and realize they've been making excuses for something. They realize they've been believing something that's impossible to believe, and they feel disgusted with themselves and disappointed with themselves, so on and so forth. It's very rare that I get someone who's even sort of oblivious in response. Once in a while, Melissa and I were talking to a woman recently who said that veganism is a personal choice. And I did this sort of bizarre comedy act in response to it, and she just sort of blanked out what I was saying, which made what I was doing funnier, frankly. But yeah, I mean, some people just go into a coma, frankly. But when you deal with people face to face, you can disassemble their beliefs. Now, for the purposes of this video, I am taking the position of a true skeptic. I'm not claiming I know what this guy's health outcomes are going to be. It's possible he gets on a vegan diet and his health gets worse. It's possible. And I can think of different reasons for that. More than 0% of people get on a vegan diet and complain they have negative health outcomes, and he could be one of those people. It's possible he gets on a vegan diet and the joint pain doesn't get better, but he has other positive improvements and he decides to stick with a vegan diet. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. The validity of veganism doesn't rely on his health outcomes, nor mine, nor yours, nor anyone else's. I mean, ultimately, what it comes down to is what I said at the very top of the video. There are 20 million people on the island of Taiwan. If they all eat pigs every day, I think you're talking about more than 60 million pigs. I mean, it really, because, pigs live for more than one day. If these pigs are getting slaughtered and eaten every day, how many pigs have to be alive and suckling? How many piglets there have to be growing up to be slaughtered and so on? Okay, but, tens of millions of people, tens of millions of pigs, it's both ethically and ecologically abhorrent. It's barbaric. I don't care if it's worse for you. I don't. Now, so let's bring it back to drunk driving. You may be such a skilled driver that you can drive safely after drinking 3 beers. I think scientifically, go ahead and prove that exists. You have someone who is a truly excellent driver, he's a trained stunt driver and racing driver, someone who's devoted his life to the art of driving, and he can drink 3 beers and he's still a better driver than you or I. He's a better driver than the average person. I don't give a fuck. We have one law that applies to everyone equally. Whether you're a good driver or a bad driver, if you've had 3 beers, you go to jail for drunk driving. I don't care, right? That is the principle of the thing. The fact that your life will get worse because you can't drink alcohol and drive a car, I don't care. I don't care that it harms you. I don't care what percentage of people have their lives made worse because drunk driving is illegal, right? I'll be honest with you. I don't care what percentage of people's lives are made better. How are we even going to calculate that? How many people's lives are made better because drunk driving is illegal? It's irrelevant to me, right? The principle of the thing stands or falls. It's valid regardless of these questions. Slavery. Your life may be worse because slavery is illegal. You may claim that if slavery were legal, you would be kind and good to your slaves. That's what a lot of slave owners claimed. It's what a lot of slave owners told their grandchildren after slavery was abolished. Oh, we were one of the good ones. We were a good family. We were good, right. We treated our slaves really well. Yeah, I don't care. Your life may be worse. You lose all of your slaves. You go from being wealthy to being poor or whatever. You go from being a white, wealthy slave owner who lives in luxury and comfort to living in fear on your own land. Now you're terrified that your former slaves are going to kill you while you're asleep. I don't care. And I don't even care how many slaves come to me and complain that they had a better life before slavery was abolished, which, by the way, every time slavery has been abolished, it's happened all over. There always are some. There are always some slaves who say it was better before, that their life got worse when slavery was abolished. And they'll tell you, hey, before I had a roof over my head and 3 meals a day. Now I'm in this terrible situation. I don't care, right? The abolition of slavery and the coercive enforcement of the principle on you and you and you, again, this is part of why I laugh in the face of the utilitarians, right? The validity of the principle has nothing to do with how many people suffer or how many people benefit, right? That's it. We are coercively opposed to drunk driving, regardless of outcomes, regardless of your skill level, et cetera, regardless of how much worse it makes your life that you can't go out and have a drink and then drive home. I understand. I mean, it really imposes a cost on people. People want to go out and drink 3 beers. They now have to pay for a taxi to come home. In New York, a taxi anywhere was like $50. It was crazy. I don't know why. But what we were looking at Uber or whatever, it's really expensive. Like that. Okay, well, we're adding $50 to the cost of your evening out. It's a big imposition, guys. The abolition of slavery was a big imposition on a lot of people, right? So I just say, I am playing the skeptic's role in this dialogue. But if you think the validity of veganism as a political cause stands or falls with your digestion or your indigestion or your joint pain or your irritable bowel syndrome, or whether or not you're able to do 300 push-ups a day like me at the gym, how muscular, no, it fucking doesn't. All right. So I know, again, you could even say I'm an anti-utilitarian, right? Sorry, let's give another real quick example. We were talking earlier today about Libya. Okay, let's do real quick. Libya, Iraq, and let's say hypothetically Saudi Arabia. Obviously, there are some people in Libya today who would say that their lives were better before the revolution when Muammar Gaddafi was in government. There are some people in Libya who would say they would prefer if the revolution had never happened, if Muammar Gaddafi were still the dictator of Libya. There are some people in Iraq who would say they were happier when Saddam Hussein was in power. They see what's happened with the American-imposed revolution, if you like, revolution from above, the American conquest. And they now have democracy and freedom of speech and newspapers that criticize the government. They have elections. They have all these things. But some people would say that the war and suffering and poverty produced by the American conquest, that it's too much, it's too awful, that they would have preferred if Saddam Hussein had ruled continuously. And presumably his sons took over. So, if in future there were a revolution in Saudi Arabia that destroyed the currently governing House of Saud and transformed Saudi Arabia into a democracy, right? Predictably, there would be some people in Saudi Arabia who would say that they wish they could go back to the way things were before, that their lives individually had gotten worse, or even they perceive society as a whole to have gotten worse. But even if it's just on the level of their own life, the fate of their family, their experience, empirically, their experience as one individual or them and their circle of friends, that their lives have gotten worse. The position I am in is to defiantly say, it doesn't matter. I don't care. Is to actually take the position of saying, no, a coercive transition to democracy is better than a dictatorship. It's better than a kingdom, you know? And I would say that, I mean, we don't know how the story ends in Libya. We don't know if Libya ends up being a democracy or a dictatorship, or if there's a new ruling royal family when the revolution is all over and done with. We don't know. It's still being fought out on the streets of Libya. But I find it very, very hard to believe that actually the next government that consolidates power in Libya will be worse than Muammar Gaddafi. I find it impossible to believe that the current government of Iraq is worse than the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein. That is, my recklessly optimistic perspective, right? So I just say, likewise, the fact that you personally, that your life got worse because we abolished slavery, well, fuck you. The fact that your life got worse because we abolished the monarchy and made a transition to democracy, well, fuck you. The fact that your personal health will get worse because of the transition to veganism. I'm taking a skeptical position in this email correspondence. But guess what, guys? The validity of veganism as a political movement, it doesn't actually stand or fall with your private, personal health outcomes. It doesn't. You have to be willing to say to people, again, this is also partly about not being a pussy, but having some courage. Let's say you meet someone and they say that slavery is all they know and it's all they understand. The only way they know to make money is through slavery. That's been their livelihood. That's the whole way agriculture is organized. They say, how are we going to farm? How are we going to feed people? How are they personally going to survive? How is it going to work without slavery? We will figure it out because we have to. And it's not going to be easy, motherfucker. And it shouldn't be easy. And it wouldn't be worth doing if it were easy. There are tons of people who can say they just don't know how they're going to live at all if they switch to a vegan diet. I get it. Whether you're an athlete who's worried about getting enough protein to still be a competitive athlete, or you're an ordinary person, or you're a mother with 6 kids, and you're just used to spending all your time entertaining your large family that preparing turkey and things. That's what your whole life has revolved around for all these years. And you say, I just don't know. I don't know what Thanksgiving is going to look like anymore. I don't know what Christmas dinner is going to look like anymore. My whole life is revolving this. My whole concept of being a good mother, of a good family, of a good parent, all of this revolves around the preparation and social consumption of meat. You will figure it out because you have to. Okay? When you put yourself in the position, even as an athlete, of like whatever, you want to eat 200 grams of protein a day, whatever your target is. 180, I hear, is the most popular. Doesn't matter. Whatever. This is also bro science. What do you want? 150 grams of protein, 180, 200, whatever. Anyway, so you want to get in 200 grams of protein a day and in a way that you can digest it so that you're not farting all day. If you're an athlete, how do I do that on a vegan diet? You can. You can figure it out, motherfucker. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm saying you'll do it because you have to do it. The same way that all kinds of people were the only form of agriculture that ever understood was through slavery, and other cultures through feudalism. They figured out new ways to organize agriculture. They figured out new ways to produce food because they had to. And they figured it out when they had to. So a lot of the time, the coercion comes first and the innovation comes second. All right, so I'm going to continue reading this. Okay, so I was just asking when I departed from the script here, what is the molecule in this magical meat broth that you actually think has some kind of health benefit? Many, many people claim that chicken eggs have some tremendously life-affirming property, but this is more perception than reality. It is more psychology than physiology. Atom by atom, there's really nothing healthy in eggs. And on the contrary, they are remarkably unhealthy. This can be seen just by looking at their constituent parts, so to speak, atom by atom. You seem to be confident that chicken broth is healthy for you, and even that it specifically benefits your joints. Do you actually believe that gelatin is good for your health? What is gelatin? It's an incomplete protein. Scientifically, why would it be healthier than or have an effect different from any other incomplete protein? Or why would it be superior to a complete protein? I will state this as a scientific fact. Any complete protein, vegan or non-vegan, will be nutritionally superior to an incomplete protein. Getting a complete protein from any vegan meal will be superior for the health of your whole body than an incomplete protein from gelatin in particular. And there is chemically nothing magical or special about the incomplete protein found in gelatin. Here is what Wikipedia says about the matter, and I have not modified this in any way aside from removing the links to the footnotes. So now we quote Wikipedia. Quote, some clinical studies report that the oral ingestion of hydrolyzed collagen decreases joint pain, those with the most severe symptoms showing the most benefit. However, other clinical trials have yielded mixed results. And now you know what Wikipedia is. It's footnote. In 2011, the European Food Safety Authority panel on dietetic products, nutrition, and allergies concluded that, quote, a cause and effect relationship has not been established between the consumption of collagen hydrolysate, pardon my Latin, and maintenance of joints. Close quote. 4 other studies report benefit with no side effects. However, the studies were not extensive and all recommended further controlled study. One study found that oral collagen only improved symptoms in a minority of patients and reported nausea as a side effect. Other studies reported no improvement in disease activity in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. Another study found that collagen treatment may actually cause an exacerbation of rheumatoid arthritis symptoms. So, close quote. That's the end of the quotation from Wikipedia. Okay, now again, if there really were a significant difference in health outcomes for those who have this in their diet versus those who don't, we should see it looking at large population studies. It should be obvious. Now, let me ask you, if you have one population that is deficient in vitamin C and another that is not deficient in vitamin C, can you see the difference? Yes, you can. Okay, it's visible. If you have one population that is deficient in iodine and another population that is not deficient in iodine, can you see the difference? Yes, you can. Okay, we even had blindness in northern Laos due to deficiency in vitamin A. Isn't that the one that's in carrots? Yeah. Vitamin A is in everything except meat. And it shows how carnivore their diet was up there. It was like, because they're not starving. It's like, whoa, vitamin A deficiency. How do you avoid vitamin A? Like it seems like it's in everything. You know what I mean? But we had blindness due to, if you were in a population deficient in vitamin A, you can see it. And you could have 2 islands, one of which is vitamin A deficient, one of which is vitamin C deficiency versus not vitamin C deficiency, right? Iron deficiency versus not iron deficiency. But even iodine. Iodine is a tiny fraction of what you ingest, right? Why? Because your body cannot produce iodine. Your body can produce collagen without eating collagen the same way a cow produces all the collagen it needs in its body without eating collagen. A cow can eat nothing but grass and still produce collagen out of the grass. So why do you think it's not possible for me eating a vegan diet to produce all the collagen I need? There's a huge onus. There's a huge burden of proof on the other side, right? It fundamentally doesn't make sense. Vitamin C deficiency makes sense. Iodine deficiency makes sense. Collagen deficiency doesn't make sense. Perhaps 25% of the dry mass of your body is collagen. It looks like about 35% of the protein mass of the body is collagen. I found one source that was using a higher percentage. It probably has to do with how do you measure, like people will say like 80% of your body is water. How you measure a huge percentage of your body is collagen. However the hell you define your body. I don't know if it's really 25% or what. Right now, your body is producing collagen from the day before you were born, while you were in the womb, until the day you die. You produce your own collagen. So trying to put collagen in this category next to iodine and vitamin C It's a very dubious proposition. But guess what? My position is still one of skepticism. I am still actually saying, I don't know, but you don't know either. And if you're not a pussy, if you're not a coward, you will try a vegan diet for 6 months, the same way you tried this crazy fucking bone broth diet for 6 months. There was no scientific basis to that experiment. So why aren't you equally bold and innovative? And why are you suddenly so risk averse? Why are you suddenly so cowardly when instead the experiment is to attempt something that many scientific sources say is a healthier diet, namely the vegan diet? Yeah, it's your ass on the line. Yeah, if your problem is you have something like arthritis, you have some kind of joint pains. He hasn't mentioned actually having arthritis. He's just mentioned joint pain. They are two separate things. So you have mentioned having joint pain. Yes, I'm genuinely skeptical. If you eat a strict vegan diet, 100% vegan diet, is it possible your joint pain will get worse? Yes. Is it possible there's a cause-effect relationship with a vegan diet? I don't know. And you don't know either. Because, for example, maybe you get on a vegan diet, but also because at the same time you're motivated to get in shape, you start going to the gym way more. And now you have more joint pain. And now you have to ask yourself, is it because I'm going to the gym? Or is it because of more than I used to? Because I'm getting more exercise? Or is it because of the switch to a vegan diet? And you won't know. This is a sense in which no matter how scientific our attitudes, no matter how skeptical our attitudes, we're all trapped in bro science again and again, forever and ever. Okay. All right. So we just quoted Wikipedia. And I say, quote, there is no reason for Wikipedia to be the beginning or the ending of anyone's research, but you must be aware the link between gelatin and improved joint pain is dubious indeed and reeks of what anthropologists would call sympathetic magic. In our culture, people believed for centuries that the human body could not generate bones without eating the bones of other animals. And Henry David Thoreau refuted this by pointing out that the oxen on the farm were pulling your plowshares with bones that they had generated from a diet of nothing but green grass. I can repeat this with collagen. What is collagen, etc.? And then for both gelatin and collagen, I must ask, is there evidence that the human body cannot produce these things for itself without reliance on an external source? My body, for example, can produce all the testosterone it needs without eating testosterone. And note that I say eating, not injecting. There is no easy argument to be made that for our bodies to produce a given chemical, we must eat precisely that chemical. The opposite attitude, that we must eat bones to produce bones, etc., is just sympathetic magic. I met a group of women in China who all worked in a vegan restaurant together. And I was with a friend at that time. He spoke Chinese really fluently. I did not. And he asked them, and he asked repeatedly, do you guys eat a vegan diet? And I think he said to me, he does. Like, I do. This guy really. And she was like, yeah, she used some word in Chinese that more vaguely means vegetarian. I was like, yeah, we're all vegetarian. And he pressed on. He kept asking. He said, no, but so do you never eat meat or whatever? And this is very telling. So what she said in Chinese was this. She said, oh, well, I've already gone through menopause, but all the other girls who work here, the waitresses and the girls who work in the kitchen, whenever it's their menstrual period, whenever that phase of the moon comes, they eat meat to replenish the blood in their bodies. They believe the only way for their body to make blood is to eat the blood of another animal, rendering themselves vampires. Okay? Your body is producing blood right now. Cows produce blood that flows through their vein, eating nothing but grass. This is sympathetic magic. The attitude that you have to drink blood in order to produce blood in your own body, that you have to eat the crushed up bones of a cow in order to produce bones in your own body. Well, how did the cow produce its bones in the first place? By eating grass. How did the cow produce its blood in the first place? By eating grass. Why can't you eat whatever, fruits and vegetables and beans or whatever, and produce your own blood and produce your own bones? Right? So again, just from a skeptical perspective, you have to say this is incredibly dubious. Right? Again, my point isn't that I know and you don't know. My point is I don't know, you don't know, and we cannot know together. But you have to realize the enormous onus that's on you. What it is you have to prove? What is the burden of proof? That's the overcome. Whoo. And yeah, there is no easy argument to be made that for our bodies to produce a given chemical, we must eat precisely that chemical. The opposite attitude, that we must eat bones to produce bones, etc., is just sympathetic magic. The art of being an old man is knowing what you do not know and working with rather than against your own ignorance productively. To live with doubt as an oar on the side of the canoe rather than being ballast in the bottom of the boat. I am not contrasting a life with ignorance to a life without ignorance. I am not like a dogmatic Christian saying, look at these poor pagans who labor in ignorance, whereas I know the truth and I'm saved. Look at these people who have a false doctrine. Or look at these people who have no doctrine at all. In contrast to me, I know the one true doctrine. My position is, I don't know and you don't know, but I am using my ignorance in the right way. I am using my ignorance as an oar and I'm rowing my canoe, and you are letting the ignorance be the ballast in the bottom of your boat as something that weighs you down. So this guy wrote back to me, and I think he is probably genuinely afraid. It just seems afraid. And he, again, pins down that he ate these collagen supplements for 2 months, and then he saw an improvement. And to his credit, he does say, hey, maybe it's a coincidence. Now, you guys may not remember this. There was a vegan YouTuber called John Venus. And this was the death of him. I mean, this really tore his life apart. It's been a long time, so you already want to talk about John Venus. It's a long time since he uploaded a YouTube video, as far as I know, too. John Venus had joint pain. If you just look at a photograph of the guy, you can see why he had joint pain. You can see why. I've made videos saying this. You can see what the cause of his problems was. He was a male bodybuilder who pushed himself to the limit and pushed himself past the limit. And, whenever he would give up on the vegan diet, he would report that his joint pain miraculously improved, right? But what he's leaving out there is that he's also changing his workout schedule, or in several cases, he completely ceased working out in order to alleviate the joint pain, right? Now, I know even I'm not a competitive bodybuilder, but when I have joint pain in any joint, I change what I'm doing at the gym in response to it, right? So what, Melissa, you were with me. I used to have, it's because I had a period where every single exercise I was doing was shoulders, and it did make my shoulders bigger. It's every day I'm maxing out my shoulders. So I wouldn't even call it joint pain, but I was just pushing my shoulders too hard. And I had to make a couple changes in response to it. So I stopped and thought, well, everything I'm doing is shoulders. And to give an example, I stopped doing bench press up here, where you're lifting up here close to your shoulders. I started only doing bench press further down. And yeah, I mean, I avoided doing shoulder exercises, I don't know, every second or third day or whatever. I tried to reduce them. I was cured. But if at that time I had also made a change in my diet, it's very easy to attribute cause and effect to that. So the point is, you change things in response to your joint pain. You change what you're doing in terms of exercise. So it is very easy to live with this kind of bro science and not know cause and effect. But anyway, in response to what he's telling me, this is what I say in reply. I say, do the work. Be a real intellectual. How many millions of people took Prozac? Prozac was debunked. How many millions believe eggs are good for their health, or that cholesterol is good for their health right now? Saying that millions of people believe this, millions of people take these supplements, millions of people believe in bone broth. Right now, bone broth seems to really be popular. Millions of people believe in taking collagen stuff. Saying millions of people do this or millions of people believe this isn't good enough. And you know this. Millions of people believe in Buddhism. Millions of people believe in Islam. Millions of people believe in meditation. Millions believe in prayer. And millions have stories of miraculous health benefits from meditation and prayer, both. And I end that email by just saying, do the work. I think it's very easy to imagine someone who takes up Buddhist meditation and then says miraculously the joint in their pates has been cured. Miraculously their arthritis has been cured. I can imagine that kind of thing too. Maybe you took up Buddhist meditation at the same time you started eating a vegetarian diet or something. There could be all kinds of other factors, but you're attributing the change to, and again, maybe your attitude changes. In terms of my eyesight improving, by the way, sorry, I would have mentioned this an hour ago or something, but when my eyesight improved, what if that's because the type of scholarship I was doing improved? The languages I was studying changed, right? So you guys know I had a period of time in my life where I was studying languages like Cambodian, Burmese, Pali, Thai, Laotian, right? I had a period of time in my life when I was out in the intense sunlight all the time, in the tropics, in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, etc. Well, those things changed. I went from being in the tropics and being in sunlight all the time to being in a different climate. I stopped doing long distance bicycle riding or bicycle racing, I want to say, but doing 100 kilometers on a bicycle. That alone is a lot of eye strain, by the way, whether or not you're in the tropics, but I'm in the tropics with the sun shining on me, but also just what I was reading and what I was writing as a scholar, like working with ancient manuscripts with Pali, with studying those languages. It's a lot of eye strain in the scholarship and reading I'm doing. And that changed. So, again, maybe my vision improved for reasons totally unrelated to my diet when you compare the vegan period of my life to the strictly vegetarian period of my life, where, again, my diet wasn't that different when I went from strictly vegetarian to vegan. But I have to tell you, my empirical opinion is that it actually was my diet. That it actually was this change in my sinuses, that I can kind of breathe more clearly now. There's absolutely zero dairy in my diet. And that I felt that somehow my vision got better at the same time and for the same reasons. Bro science. Do I know of no, I don't know of any mechanism. Can I recommend this to you and others? No. I don't think it's like the laws of physics, the law of gravity. I'm dreading reading what's in this comment section here. I'm just dreading. I'm dreading turning to this comment section and the low intellectual caliber of the questions that are coming in. If anyone wants to vindicate my interest in reading what's in the comment section, now's a good time to contribute. Okay. So I'm done with reading out my emails. Just glanced over the later emails in that correspondence. So Shenandoah has for some reason insisted, quote, eating animals is not equivalent to slavery. Now, Shenandoah, I've written 2 books. Do you want to pass me those 2, babe? This book is over 600 pages long. And this is 130 pages long, roughly. You can get this in both English and Spanish. Never once in these books do I say that eating animals is equivalent to slavery. I have recorded over 2,000 YouTube videos Are we at, someone can check, are we at 3,000 yet? We may be. Well, I honestly don't know. Someone can check right now. How many YouTube videos have I recorded? You will never once hear me say that eating animals is equivalent to slavery. I have also made many videos talking about the meaning and importance of democracy, including this one. I know you have to go back an hour or something now, but there's quite a lot of real substance here about democracy. Have you ever heard me say that democracy in Japan is equivalent to democracy in Canada? Have you ever heard me say that democracy in Iraq is equivalent to democracy in France? Equivalent. It's an interesting word to use, right? However, understanding democracy in Japan can deepen and assist and help you in understanding democracy in Canada, the good and the bad of it. Understanding democracy in France, the whole history of democracy in France, how it operates today also, like right now, what happened the last 6 months, the next 6 months. Understanding democracy in France can help you understand democracy in Iraq. Understanding one can help you understand the other. They're not equivalent. They're not. Now, I could probably repeat this with communism. Certainly, I mean, to choose two small countries, communism in Cuba is not equivalent to communism in Cambodia under Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. It's not. They're starkly different historical examples. However, would you tell a Cuban person, let's say you knew someone who was born and raised in Cuba and heard nothing but pro-communist propaganda otherwise, would you say to them, oh, no, you don't need to understand the history of communism in Russia or China or Cambodia. That's just not equivalent, right? The non-equivalence of the history of communism in those other countries makes it more meaningful and more worth it. Like you learn to understand communism in Cuba more deeply and more profoundly by knowing the history of communism in Cambodia and China and Russia and in any of these other examples. Okay, the history of eating meat is very different from the history of slavery. Nevertheless, each illuminates the other. And as I've said 100 times, the excuses are harder to quit than the thing itself. Meat is not addictive. Cocaine is. It's very hard to get someone to quit using cocaine. It's very hard to get someone to quit using nicotine. These things are addictive. Why? Why is eating meat so hard for people to quit? All right. It's because of beliefs. Right? It's a belief system. And the critique of the culture of meat eating, in some ways it's comparable to slavery. Pardon me. In some ways it's comparable to religion. In some ways it's comparable to gender politics and other very, very different things. Now, I have seen attempts to compare animal rights, that's the way they would put it, not veganism, but animal rights, compare the progress of animal rights to giving women the right to vote. Again, yes. Well, animal rights is really not equivalent to women being able to vote. But a very brilliant and intelligent person might be able to say something illuminating where they make some comparisons. And if you're very stupid, you might say something very stupid that isn't illuminating to anyone at all by comparing the two. You might have no insight into either one. So Sam Walsh says he's 349 pages into No More Manifestos. I'm tempted to just turn to page 349 and start reading. We can go through the rest of the book together right now. Shenandoah says, you seem to be implying that you want to outlaw animal agriculture. Well, I can say, buy my book and not answer the question. Instead, I will say this. There has been a long-running debate about what the difference is between being vegan and merely being plant-based. It's an interesting example of a kind of philosophical or political debate because the categories were created first, and then people debated what should be placed in each category. I will tell you right now the difference between being vegan and being plant-based. If you genuinely believe that veganism is just a choice you can make for your own personal health, equivalent to being lactose intolerant, but you don't care in the least that your husband drinks milk, your wife drinks milk, your children drink milk, your parents drink milk, your coworkers, that the whole of society continues to forcibly inseminate cows and then have those cows live their entire life on a concrete floor inside a steel cage, looking up at a steel sky, never seeing the sun. That those cows live their whole lives indoors, in captivity, being forcibly inseminated, impregnated, milked, and their babies decapitated and turned into meat. You have no problem with that. It's just you personally eat a plant-based diet equivalent to having lactose intolerance. Many people are that. They're not ethically lactose intolerant. They just don't eat milk. If that is your position, then you are plant-based. Whereas if you are vegan, you have adopted the view that what is true for me is true for you also. And it doesn't matter if you're black and white. It doesn't matter if you're an indigenous person from the Arctic Circle who is Inuit, or if you're an indigenous person from near the equator in Bolivia, living in a jungle, that it doesn't matter who you are, that the ecological effects for the planet as a whole are the same. If you eat meat, if you drink milk, whether you're a black person or a white person, a rich person, a poor person, a person from the North Pole, a person from the equator, that the effects for the cow are the same. That the ethical and ecological significance is the same for me as for you. It's the same for my mother. It's the same for my daughter. It's the same for everyone. And therefore, this obligation to be vegan is incumbent upon everyone. That is the difference between being plant-based and being vegan. And the major premise of this book is that vegans have been deluding themselves into thinking that we live on the cusp of a new era of enlightenment in which the vast majority of people are going to accept this voluntarily. And they're not. Not even 1% of people globally are going to become what I can simply call real vegans. What is a real vegan? Someone who is doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And now we have to start to ask ourselves very hard questions. And the questions are not, if you were the king of Spain, what would you do? The question is not, if you somehow managed to get 51% of the seats in parliament to be your fellow vegans, what would you do? The question is, how do we work individually and collectively? How do we work as isolated individuals, as groups of people of 5 or 10 people, or as a mass movement scaling up? But you can't get to that third level without the first and second. First, you have to be an individual, then you have to have a group of 5 or 10 people, right? And then you can start talking about larger numbers of people organized, or they're organized, or they're not. How can we work to change the world with this awareness that we are now and forever will be a despised and powerless minority that just happens to be right? And it's not just that we're ethically right. It's that we're ecologically right at a point of time when very simply, the existence of human civilization hangs in the balance.